Something happened overnight that almost nobody outside military intelligence circles fully understands yet. And by the time the morning reports started emerging across Europe, analysts in Brussels, Washington, London, and Moscow were already trying to piece together how significant this moment might actually become in the larger trajectory of the war. Because what Ukraine managed to do was not simply another isolated drone strike or another symbolic attack designed for headlines. This was something much larger, something more coordinated, more strategic, and potentially far more dangerous for the Kremlin moving forward. Ukrainian long-range drones reportedly crossed enormous distances through heavily defended Russian airspace and struck targets connected directly to military logistics, fuel infrastructure, and operational support networks. Fires could be seen burning through the night. Emergency crews scrambled across multiple regions, and Russian authorities immediately attempted to downplay the scale of the damage. But the real story is not just about what exploded. The real story is about what these strikes reveal regarding the evolution of Ukraine's military capabilities, the vulnerabilities growing inside Russia's defense architecture, and the reality that this war has now entered a phase where distance no longer guarantees safety. That changes everything. It changes how military commanders think. It changes how resources are allocated. It changes how civilians inside Russia perceive the conflict. And, most importantly, it changes the psychological balance of the war itself. For more than 4 years now, Russia has attempted to maintain the image of a state capable of absorbing unlimited pressure. Kremlin media continuously portrays the war as stable, controlled, and strategically manageable. According to official narratives, Russia still holds the initiative. But behind that carefully managed image, the strain is becoming harder and harder to hide. Oil depots continue burning. Ammunition facilities continue exploding. Railway infrastructure continues suffering disruptions. Military recruitment continues requiring larger financial incentives. Air defense systems continue being redistributed deeper into Russian territory because attacks once considered impossible are now becoming increasingly common. And while Russian state television focuses on territorial maps and patriotic rhetoric, the deeper military reality tells a more complicated story. Wars of attrition are not won through propaganda alone. They are won through sustainable logistics, industrial endurance, troop morale, technological adaptation, and economic resilience. Ukraine understands this now better than ever. And instead of trying to defeat Russia purely through traditional frontal offensives, it has increasingly shifted toward systematic pressure campaigns aimed directly at the machinery keeping Russia's war effort operational. That strategy is becoming visible everywhere across the battlefield and beyond it. Ukrainian planners have clearly recognized that modern warfare depends less on dramatic single breakthroughs and more on cumulative degradation. You do not necessarily need to destroy every enemy battalion if you can slowly weaken the systems supporting those battalions. Every fuel depot matters. Every damaged refinery matters. Every disrupted rail connection matters. Every destroyed ammunition warehouse matters. Every military airfield forced to suspend operations matters. And over time, those pressures accumulate into operational consequences that are impossible to fully conceal. This is exactly why the long-range drone campaign matters so much strategically. Ukraine is not merely attacking targets. It is forcing Russia to defend enormous areas simultaneously while draining resources. Russian commanders now have to think about protecting infrastructure hundreds or even thousands of kilometers from the front line. In military terms, Ukraine is imposing cost asymmetry. And perhaps the most remarkable part of all this is how rapidly Ukraine developed these capabilities under wartime conditions. At the beginning of the invasion in 2022, many analysts believed Ukraine's military survival would depend almost entirely on external support. Very few people imagined that within a few years, Ukraine would become one of the most innovative drone warfare powers on the planet. Yet that is exactly what has happened. Ukrainian engineers, software developers, and military planners have built an entire ecosystem around unmanned warfare. Drone production has scaled dramatically. New models appear constantly. Some systems are designed for reconnaissance. Others target armor. Others function as deep strike weapons. Others operate in naval environments. This level of adaptation under battlefield pressure is extraordinary from a military historical perspective. Entire defense academies across Europe and North America are now studying Ukrainian drone doctrine. Meanwhile, the actual fighting along the front remains unimaginably brutal. Despite all the headlines about drones and deep strikes, much of this war is still being fought through artillery duels, trench systems, and infantry assaults. Entire towns and villages across eastern and southern Ukraine have become landscapes of destruction, shaped by years of bombardment. Russian forces continue launching assaults. Ukrainian defenders continue adapting through layered defenses. What makes this conflict so unique is that 20th century industrial warfare is colliding directly with 21st century surveillance technology in real time. Nearly every movement near the front can potentially be observed from the air. Tanks worth millions can be destroyed by relatively cheap FPV drones. Supply convoys can be tracked constantly. Artillery positions can be identified within minutes. Battlefield concealment itself has become dramatically more difficult. Military doctrines developed over decades are now being rewritten under combat conditions every single month. Russia still possesses enormous destructive capabilities, and it would be a mistake to underestimate them. The Russian military continues launching missile strikes, glide bomb attacks, and artillery barrages. Cities remain under constant threat. Energy systems continue being targeted. Russia still retains the ability to mobilize additional manpower and sustain prolonged warfare. But even large powers face limits under sustained attritional pressure. And increasingly, the indicators suggest that Russia is being forced into difficult trade-offs. Air defense systems moved to protect strategic facilities inside Russia are systems not available elsewhere. Ammunition consumption remains enormous. Equipment losses continue accumulating. Maintenance cycles become more demanding. Economic strain slowly compounds beneath official statistics. Together, over time, they shape the strategic environment in profound ways. The economic dimension of this conflict may ultimately prove just as important as the military one. Modern industrial war requires extraordinary resource consumption. That is precisely why Ukraine has increasingly focused on Russian oil infrastructure. Oil revenue remains one of the central pillars supporting the Russian state and its war economy. Every refinery disruption matters. Every production slowdown matters. Every export complication matters. Even when individual strikes do not create catastrophic immediate damage, they still generate cumulative economic friction. Insurance costs rise. Repairs consume resources. Transport routes become less efficient. Production schedules become disrupted. The overall system becomes less flexible and more expensive to maintain. In long wars, those kinds of pressures matter enormously. At the same time, the political landscape surrounding the conflict continues evolving rapidly. Europe today looks very different from Europe before the invasion. Defense spending has surged. Strategic doctrines are shifting. Nations are restructuring entire security policies. Ukraine itself has become increasingly integrated into European political and military structures. Discussions about reconstruction and EU integration demonstrate how profoundly the map of Europe has already changed. Ukraine is becoming structurally tied to the Western system for generations. And perhaps the most important reality of all is that neither side currently believes time is working entirely against them. Russia still appears convinced that Western political fatigue could eventually weaken international support for Kiev. Ukraine still believes technological innovation and strategic adaptation can erode Russia's offensive capacity. That means this war continues evolving into something larger than territorial disputes alone. It is now a test of endurance between competing systems: political, economic, industrial, military, and technological systems. Every strike, every barrage, every adaptation contributes to that larger contest. The world is watching this transformation unfold in real time because the implications extend far beyond Ukraine itself. Military analysts understand that the lessons emerging from this conflict will shape warfare globally for decades. Governments are studying drone tactics and logistics vulnerability with extraordinary attention. Defense industries are adapting production priorities based on what this war has revealed. Strategic planners are reconsidering assumptions that dominated military thinking for years. This war is no longer unfolding according to the expectations that existed at the beginning of the invasion. Ukraine has demonstrated a capacity for resilience, innovation, and adaptation that shocked much of the world. Russia has demonstrated both immense destructive capability and a willingness to absorb extraordinary losses in pursuit of strategic goals. And somewhere between those two realities, the future security architecture of Europe is being rewritten strike by strike, month by month, kilometer by kilometer, with consequences that may define international politics for an entire generation.